Welcome to the Legal Innovation Forum podcast series, leading at the intersection of business and law. In this episode, we welcome Monica Zent, founder and CEO of Zent Law and principal at the Law Innovation Agency. A seasoned entrepreneur, legal tech pioneer, and expert in AI law and policy, Monica brings a unique blend of legal insight and product innovation. Today, she'll share how legal organizations can harness emerging technologies from AI to blockchain to drive digital transformation. Okay, I'll redo that one. Today, she'll share how legal organizations can harness emerging technologies from AI to blockchain to drive digital transformation. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.
A quick note from our podcast sponsor. Tired of dealing with document chaos in your corporate legal department? Let iManage simplify your life. With iManage's powerful document and email management system, you'll have everything you need in one place. Secured, organized, and easy to access. iManage is trusted by 40% of the Fortune 100 and by legal teams worldwide. Learn more about iManage on www.imanage.com.
Welcome to our Legal Innovation Forum podcast. I'm Andrew Bowyer, and I am the founder of the Legal Innovation Forum. Today, we're interviewing Monica Zent, founder and CEO of Zent Law and principal at the Law Innovation Agency. Monica is a seasoned entrepreneur, strategist, and legal tech pioneer with 2 successful exits and a career spanning tech, media, licensing, compliance, and professional services. As a patented investor and expert in AI law and policy, she brings a rare blend of product innovation, legal insight, and operational leadership. Monica currently advises venture investors and legal organizations on how to navigate emerging technologies from AI to blockchain while driving meaningful digital transformation. Fantastic to have you here today, Monica.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here.
So, as we were discussing before the podcast, you've had an interesting journey. I think there's perhaps a book in your life in the Silicon Valley, your life and times in the Silicon Valley. Tell us about your career path and how that ended up in you founding Zent Law and innovation, involved in the Law Innovation Agency.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think there are a few books in my future, for sure, in terms of what I'll write. But yeah, I would love to chat about that. In terms of my career journey, where do I begin? I guess I would first start with, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much all my life, so about 30 years now, for as long as I can remember, always sort of having a side hustle, starting a side business, trying to figure out how to make a buck. And it started at a young age, continued on through schools, through college, through grad school, after grad school, and into my early life out in the career environment and beyond. So have often been starting companies, and I am a builder by nature. I enjoy building and creating and experimenting with different types of offerings and companies and technology. So that's been something that sort of weaves through the fabric of my life and career. I would say in terms of my early career, I was an entrepreneur, actually, starting companies before I became a lawyer. So I had started a couple of companies. First one came about during grad school and then launched it after grad school. Another one was launched after I became a lawyer, was, I think, in the process of being licensed and then just getting licensed, but I already had that second company underway. Had a third company that I started. I sold the first couple. And so through these journeys, I mean, it was great and fun. One was tech related, another was music related, then another was music related again. Music industry, the first one was in music licensing. But I learned a lot about myself as well as about building companies and pursuing a vision and creating technology and lots of other lessons wrapped in there. Fast forward, I had ended up practicing law a little bit. I practiced both in-house, I practiced at a large law firm. Having hired lawyers as well for my own ventures, as well as for my own representation, I started to become an early real estate investor around my late 20s. I ended up in practicing in a large law firm, got to see under the hood, basically, of what was going on. And it spurred another kind of innovation, if you will, really developing the concept for Zent Law. The business model at the time was extremely unfamiliar. The idea of an alternative legal services provider did not exist. There were only a small handful of us in the market at the time. This is back in 2002. And the idea really didn't exist. I mean, this concept of flexible legal talent, lawyers on secondments, other legal talent available on secondments, subscription legal services, even concepts around legal operations, which we were doing early versions of that type of work, really did not exist at the time. And so, again, in typical entrepreneurial spirit, felt that I wanted to launch something and move forward with that, and let's experiment with it. Not going to lie, it was a rough time early on, educating the market, going out there, pitching, talking with clients, trying to convince people that there was another way that could be just as good as what they were accustomed to, but trying something different and getting them to do that. So continued to grow the business and have since grown the business. It's now been 23 years. I have also, during that time, launched other companies, expanded other types of investment activity, founded and built some legal tech companies, invested in legal tech companies, and advised many, and continued on as well.
Yeah, and you're also a prolific writer, I see, in lots of publications.
Yeah, I do enjoy writing. I try to write as much as I can. Don't have as much time, but yes, enjoy.
Yeah, me too. So when you started Zent Law, so you started that in the Silicon Valley, and were your first clients in the Silicon Valley, and who did you convince? If you can tell us, it's 23 years ago, so maybe it's okay. Who did you convince who and how did you convince that your model was worth trying?
Yeah, great question. Wow. I haven't really been asked those questions before in terms of like the early clients, but yeah, I mean, well, yeah, so founded in Silicon Valley, based in Silicon Valley. Interestingly, back then, I hired people throughout the country to work with us, and the concept of remote work did not exist at the time. I had a concept and even a service offering called virtual counsel at the time, this idea of making people available virtually. And I remember trying to pitch the concept. It was very hard to get clients okay with that. This is, again, back in 2002, people wanted people in offices. They wanted them to go there. They wanted to see them in person. And it was really hard to get people okay with this idea of virtual counsel. It was a service line. It wasn't our largest service line, as you can imagine, because it didn't go over as well at the time. Fast forward, right, years later, virtual work, remote work is a no-brainer. But we were doing it long before, and well before COVID, in fact, with remote engagements, years before COVID hit, and then it became something that clients not only expected, but needed. But so that was kind of interesting, and an interesting trajectory. In terms of early clients, many of them were early tech companies. So early kind of internet tech companies like Yahoo. We worked with Yahoo, did a lot of work with them, worked with other companies like Intuit, companies that had been around at that time that were sort of early tech or early software companies. Again, it was still a tough sell at the time in many ways. They were accustomed to using their large firms, and that was how they did things. And it was in-house or large firms, and that's how work was done. So the idea of using external alternative legal services providers really was not a thing at all. But it was speaking with folks that were sort of receptive, forward-looking, progressive-minded, in-house counsel, and getting them to try something new and be willing to try something new. And it was really those experimental mindsets that allowed us to get in the door and allow them to try something new. But yeah, it was not easy those early days. A lot of pitching and a lot of no's, a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
But I kind of like a challenge, so I didn't want to give up until I could get people to say yes.
Yeah, and clearly it's worked. So
yeah, exactly.
Your profession has become your entrepreneurial vocation too. So what you settle on. So legal operations, I want to talk to you about that and that aspect of Zent Law. So two things is one is what do you consult on and support on legal operations, and what are the most pressing things right now you see going on in the legal ops world? And I think the second question I have is, again, I think you could argue that this notion of legal operations, as many concepts have come out of the Valley, I think it really crystallized out of the Valley with Clock, right? That came out of participants from major tech companies, and that whole sort of paradigm and framework that's informed legal operations in other sectors was started out of the Valley. So tell us a little bit about what you do now and how you've seen that sort of journey evolve, and where do you think legal operations is going?
Yeah, great question. Lots packed in there. So I'll unpack some of it. Let's see. So first of all, legal ops. I mean, legal ops was a thing that we were doing at Zent Law years before it was kind of coined legal operations and so popular and this whole career path now for people. It started with a lot of contracting-based legal ops. So we would offer services to clients that included creating contract playbooks, created templates, creating training guides, sort of making the contracting process more efficient. We also created early versions of outside counsel guidelines. So we created some of these tools. We created automations for NDA handling and transactions. So we were doing some of this within in-house corporate legal departments early on, years before legal ops was a thing, and bringing these ideas and bringing these sort of implementations to clients at a time. Again, mostly drawn from just being a bit entrepreneurial sort of ideas that I came up with in terms of what could be done, how things could be done differently, more efficiently. That's sort of part of our DNA at Zent Law. It always has been. And it's drawn a little bit from my own personality, enjoying things organized and neat and efficient and tidy and well done. And so kind of drawing from those ideas, kind of parlayed into these service offerings. And legal ops, yes, I mean, it did kind of take off. There were other folks that were more in a conventional ops role in legal departments, and that's kind of what formed that small community called Clock. And it was a small community at the time. I mean, years ago, it was sort of about 30 or 40 people getting together in a conference room in one of the local Silicon Valley tech companies. I remember those groups. I know the people in those groups. I have been to present in front of those groups years ago when they were just a small consortium. And so then when they launched Clock, of course, Zent Law was an inaugural sponsor. We were there right at the beginning and sponsored for 10 years since, and have kind of been there through that journey of supporting the legal operations community through the work that we do. We work with some legal ops, wonderful legal ops partners, know some of the folks involved, obviously, with the Clock movement. And so it's been kind of interesting to see that community grow and to see legal ops become kind of its own thing, but also, frankly, a career path for many people as well. Yeah. We've also built that into our business. We have a lot of folks in our flexible talent engagements that have a legal ops background. And there's some of our really popular talent on our side where clients will call, and if they need somebody in legal ops to help them or to help either stand up a legal ops function, or usually it's they need bench strength in some capacity. Yeah. And so we've had a lot of wonderful folks on our team over the years with legal ops backgrounds that have been able to secure wonderful eventual in-house jobs, launching off their Zent Law flexible talent engagements. So yeah, we've done work in that sense. We've done work in terms of the consulting realm. We've done work in the consulting realm with our partners that we work with on the legal ops front. And so there's a lot of sort of interesting work there. And then to answer your question about sort of what's on the horizon for legal ops, obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot with legal tech, so have been very involved in legal tech for a long time as one of the earliest legal tech founders and investors. But there's a lot legal tech kind of related that we're seeing in legal ops, primarily questions around, okay, how do I harness AI? What should we be doing in our team and our legal departments? How do we bring AI into our legal departments? What legal tech should we be using? So those are a lot of common questions. Automation is sort of table stakes now. I mean, we're seeing, of course, still companies trying to manage what they can automate. Where can they automate? How can they refine process? What does that look like? And then, of course, other themes we're seeing and working with them on, mostly through things we do through Law Innovation Agency, are things maybe like training, other digital transformation initiatives that will help them look at how they can approach the legal department's needs and work with fresh eyes.
Yeah, that's we obviously put a number of programs on all over North America and the world, and we do a lot of virtual programs as well. And this implementation and adoption piece still comes across as a key challenge, and that ultimately is process. what do you notice as the big hurdles in a legal department that are different perhaps than other departments and organizations in terms of ironing out that process function? Is there something, is there a unique fingerprint in legal versus, say, I don't know, the finance department or the procurement department or the sales group or marketing that you've noticed a pattern of over time with all of your engagements?
That's a great question, Andrew. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, you raise a question of, can't process be created somewhat uniformly across an organization? And arguably it should be, and sometimes in certain areas it can be. I think what's unique about legal is that you have legal departments, you have legal departments that have different functions within the department. So there's different natures of work that have to be addressed. So a process that may work for compliance may not necessarily work over here for IP and licensing, or over here on the security and enforcement front. So, or even on litigation. So because of the different nature of work that kind of falls under the legal department's umbrella, sometimes you're going to need to have some different processes around some of those workflows. And that's okay. That's important because that is a nuance around the law. You also have sort of the idea of the personalities attached to the work, and lawyers kind of tending to have their own way of doing things. And so that sometimes can creep in, and it can impact trying to get to a uniform process. Now, there are certain back office functions or certain uniform processes that can be built in, and where they can be, they should be. A good example might be how a company handles non-disclosure agreements, right? How they sign those, what is the process around how you retrieve that document, send it for signature, get it signed, and it goes into the system of record and so forth. So that kind of process is a great example of something that can be uniform across the entire company. When you have salespeople needing to pull these documents or people in another department. There could be other processes that could be somewhat uniform across the company. Good example might be compliance or security related alerts. These are things that might touch different teams within an organization. They might touch legal, might touch compliance, they might touch security. They might even touch HR, depending on what the nature of the alert is. And it might also touch customer service or operations that deal with customer success. And so depending on the nature of the alerts. So those are other examples where there may be opportunities to streamline across, but sometimes it takes looking at things cross-functionally, looking at a workflow or a work stream. What other teams does it touch? Is there a way to streamline this? Is there a way to build a process that, again, can stretch across these different functions within the organization? That sometimes is possible. And sometimes it isn't executed on well, because quite frankly, there may not be that cross-functional collaboration going on to set out. So that's kind of where we would come in on the digital transformation front. It really starts with the people, process, technology. We draw from our many years of work and learnings at Zent Law around that front, and sort of bringing that over into Law Innovation Agency, which does something different than Zent Law. Unlike an ALSP, it's offering the digital transformation and sort of the training and support in terms of how companies or law firms may go about looking at what they can do to leverage technology, but also be more efficient and effective and scale well. And it does start with people, really, and then process, and then looking at the tech. On the people front, you mentioned training, and absolutely, training can be a huge part of this, but also before you even get to training, looking at the culture of the organization. So culture is super important. And it's like that saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I believe it's really true. You really have to look at that culture and building a culture that is going to be able to embrace technology and process and move fast. And that comes from the top. So looking at culture, looking at what the culture is within the company, the legal department, and then subgroups within the legal department, and making sure that that culture supports what you're trying to accomplish. And that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our themes this year, and is ongoing, is that for our overarching theme is navigating in a risk-on era, navigating change in a risk-on era. So the case that we make at the forum is to say, risk on in the financial markets is usually a good sign, but we're flipping that a little bit on its head. It's not necessarily a good sign. It's just the way the world is right now. We're going through a dramatic reshuffling, a redrafting of globalization, a redrafting of all of these assumptions that we've basically built the post 1989 economy on for varying reasons, which you don't need to get in. And then you have a geopolitical shifts. You have many more things to think about in 2025 as a lawyer or a leading general counsel than you did perhaps in 2019. So it's been quite a dynamic decade, we could say, to say the least. So our view is looking forward to 2030. Plus you have AI now too. So you have all this change going on. The role of an in-house leader is more important than ever, is what I believe.
Yeah.
Because navigating and protecting your organization from all these sort of compounding risks is almost as important as the organization taking advantage of opportunities, because things can change so quickly, and they have changed so quickly, and they constantly change so quickly, that if you're not managing those risks, then you can be out of business very quickly, much faster than you were before, because there's all these dramatic shifts going on. So where do you see the legal department fitting into that, and legal leaders fitting into that, and how a legal department will evolve, let's say in 5 years' time, in 2030? And what is the role of technology in supporting that function in their ultimate function, which is protecting the business from these multitudes of risk?
Yeah, that's a great question and observation, Andrew. And I commend you for sort of covering and trying to unpack this, not just in this podcast, but some of your other programs and your forums, because yeah, it's a huge question, and it's a big area of focus. I mean, absolutely, as you said, there's lots going on in the political and sort of regulatory realm, geopolitical realm, and the economic or larger macroeconomic climate that are impacting lots of different changes and bringing changes, plus the massive technological shift with the advent and proliferation of AI. So absolutely. From a risk perspective, I mean, I'm particularly interested in risk. I would say it's sort of a key component of my investment thesis, but also the types of legal tech or enterprise legal tech companies that I'm most interested in. I'm really interested in those that are sort of addressing the risk-related questions. To me, no matter what level of technology adoption we have across the board, risk is never going to go away in the enterprise. There will always be risk. And so there will always be an opportunity to invest or build companies that address that risk. And so that's something that's of unique focus and interest for me as an investor, as an advisor, as well as a builder. And so I would say, yes, absolutely. To answer your question, the legal team plays a key role in addressing risk within an organization. It always has, but I believe that's a heightened role now, especially for the reasons you mentioned. And there are greater degrees of risk right now that we're seeing with companies in terms of what they're facing. Good examples would be obviously just the amounts of data, right? There's so many risks around data and sort of how data is managed and handled, and the exposure that customers and users of products and services have. With everything being sort of tech enabled, more data is being harnessed now than ever. And as a result, it's at greater risk. And then you have an increase or proliferation in potential threat actors. You have threat actors that have more sophisticated technologies that they can use to act upon various types of attacks. And so you have sort of all these other factors that are contributing to a greater heightened risk picture. Plus you have an increasing regulatory oversight, right? Probably appropriately so to some degree. But when it comes to privacy, I've covered this in some of my issues of Venture Legal, the newsletter that I write on LinkedIn. My most recent issue was on some of the federal regulatory changes. I've written about kind of AI and IP. I've written about some AI and privacy and what we're seeing there. I have some new pieces coming out that'll touch on some of those topics. But we're starting to see an increase in some regulatory activity around the privacy front, to look at protecting individuals' rights to privacy, again, in this age of AI. And that's, again, serves purposes, and it's important. At the same time, it does heighten the compliance burden for organizations. And so organizations have to be under a more significant set of controls and have better processes and technology that's going to help them manage these types of risks. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, legal teams are under more pressure than ever to address heightened risks from a regulatory compliance perspective, from a data and exposure perspective, as well as from the perspective of what companies are trying to do or trying to accomplish. Growth and even in the business climate is is risky right now. It's a very competitive environment. You have companies that have been out for a while that are finding their products or services may become obsolete because of AI. So you've got business layers of risk, you have cybersecurity layers of risk, and you have data and compliance, regulatory related risk. And so these confounding factors create a greater risk, heightened risk environment that companies do need to think about. And as far as the role of the general counsel and the role of the in-house counsel, absolutely, risk is a core component of their functions. They should be thinking about it. They should be considering options for how they can mitigate that, obviously, and leveraging and looking at where they can use technology to help do that. And that's kind of where we come in as consultants as well, in terms of what technologies make sense. But first, going back to the ideas of what are the key risks for your organization, what are the processes around how you currently manage that, what processes are lacking, what cross-functional support is lacking, what needs to be built in, and then, of course, layering on the appropriate technology to help facilitate those goals.
Fantastic answer. Very comprehensive, as my questions tend to be a little bit run-on questions, 3 questions in 1 question. So thank you.
Very good at the compound questions.
Yes, I know. You've been handling them well. Sometimes I get some pushback on them. So the question I have about legal tech and AI's impact on the sector. You've been, on the ground floor of legal tech's rise, the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley story, which just keeps going on, like we discussed before this call, legal operations, and as part of that tech story, now we have AI, which of course has been around for a long time in different, and it's been discussed in legal circles as being disruptive for many years now. But this time, I guess, is it different? And what do you see the structure of the sector looking like? And again, in looking towards 2030, we seem to have got over that sort of, it's a little bit like the stages of grief or something to some extent. People have got over that, first that sort of shock phase, and it's not going to affect me. And now they're sort of at the acceptance phase. Of course, that doesn't speak for everybody. Some people have been integrating it completely, but I think the common theme is this is here to stay. It's going to be transformational for the sector, and we need to get our heads around it really quick to maintain our competitiveness or the value we're adding. So 2 questions. What do you see the impact of AI being for large law firms and the folks who are providing legal services, such as yourselves, Zent Law, and you're competing with firms, I'm sure, on some levels and collaborating, etc. How do you see that impacting their business models? And do you think it's going to have a fundamental impact in the next 3-4 years? And then how do you see that interaction for legal departments too? Because, they're in companies that are adopting AI, wholesale AI, or even selling AI in their own companies. And that's changing how their workflows work as well. And how does that how do the deck chairs look in 2030 between tech providers, law firms, and legal departments? Those are my 3 questions.
Yeah. Only 3 this time. That's great. Yeah, no, great question, Andrew. And I would say, well, certainly, I mean, you're probably asking the wrong person. I'm a technologist. I love technology. I'm very bullish on AI. And I've been around AI for a long time in terms of some of my earliest legal tech companies leveraged early forms of AI with machine learning, natural language processing, and some of the early technologies that I created, including a clause engine, which I enjoyed the most and wanted to build out further. Quite frankly, and this was years ago, as a founder, the output that I envisioned and wanted to see was simply not possible in terms of what we could do. It was possible, but not of the level that I wanted to see. And sort of that was a pre-chat GPT world. So now that we have sort of the technologies, fast forward 7-8 years later, since those legal tech companies that I created, now we fast forward and we have sort of this world of these large language models, and we have the capabilities that we have now. The output is so much better, and so we're able to produce the kind of output that I had envisioned years ago. I think that's the case for many founders or early founders that touched NLP and machine learning, and were trying to create and tinker and create things that we simply couldn't produce the level of output that we can now with the technology that's available. So that's really interesting and exciting. And as you mentioned, correctly noted, I mean, those of us that have been in legal tech for a long time, we've been talking about AI for a number of years. There are some of my contemporaries in legal tech who are early legal tech founders as well. And we have been writing and speaking about these topics for years. I wrote a piece back in 2017 talking about AI coming to legal tech and AI coming to legal and why it's important. So, I mean, these are not new ideas for us that have been sort of at the forefront with legal tech. I think what's really interesting now is, of course, we have the technology to really back it up, this amazing technology and the capability that we have that we didn't have before. And so it really unlocks a lot of opportunity. It unlocks a lot of capability, but also creates these opportunities to solve some problems that before were simply not possible to solve without this level of technology or the speed at which we can move. So that's also really exciting. And it's exciting in the enterprise realm. It's exciting, I know, for colleagues that I have that are more focused on legal tech in the consumer realm or access to justice realm. There's so many other opportunities now in terms of what can be solved. And then back to your question on sort of, okay, what's the impact of this on law firms or ALSPs, and is it fundamental? Yes, absolutely. I mean, I believe by 2030, we will absolutely see AI as part of the daily fabric of our lives, no question about it, and part of the daily fabric of our work lives. I believe it's a lot like many other technological shifts that those of us who have been around for a while have lived through, from the advent of obviously email and using email, and then SaaS and digital signatures. You know, these were technologies that when they came on the scene, it was, oh my gosh, can we do this? What are we getting into? You know, and everyone was sort of looking at it and observing and trying to figure out how they could adopt it. And then eventually it was adopted. It became ubiquitous, like a no-brainer. And I believe that's going to be the case with AI. It's just another technological advancement and adoption, and people are getting over this hump. They're using it, they're finding it's effective, and they're finding that they can and will work alongside it. And I believe that that is the workplace of the future, that humans will be working alongside AI agents as they do with fellow coworkers right now. And it will be very common, and it will be well understood, and it will be expected, and it will be something that people are accustomed to doing. I believe that individuals will begin to train their own AI agents, and those AI agents will be something that they interact with and use on a daily basis. So I have a lot of thoughts. I tend to ponder a lot of the futurism. It's a topic that interests me and always has. So I do think about sort of what we're going to see in terms of not just our industry, but at large. And I do believe AI is definitely here to stay, and it will be something very common by 2030 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see, you know, month by month, almost how you, as an observer, you see people integrating it into their work, you integrate it into your own work, and people integrating it into their daily lives, for better or worse sometimes. Maybe
Yeah.
I take it they listen to GPT's responses a little too carefully about their personal lives and stuff, maybe.
Oh.
But I think the other question is this notion of value for law firms, right? Because you know, this would be something I no doubt you'll no doubt will have some ideas on, because you've set up a subscription model for some of your work. So first of all, tell me about the aegis of the subscription model on your side, how that's worked. And then the bigger question for the overall sector is this the death knell of the billable hour finally? Because again, that's something everyone's been talking about for a long time. But question, you know, I'm sure it will have an impact on it. And then that just creates a question about, if you're a you know, external legal services provider, a law firm or an ALSP, whatever you want to define it, how do you define that notion of value and prove that value that you're asking for in terms of the amount you're being paid, if the billable hour descends in the hierarchy of how legal services are charged for?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly back to sort of billable hour, we'll come back to that. But on the ALSP front, so as an alternative legal services provider, ALSP, our focus has always been on value and efficiency and kind of delivering value-oriented offerings that are aligned closely with a client's needs and budget. So for us, that's been core and fundamental to our offerings, to the way that they're priced, and even the services delivery model. Our flexible talent, we also have the subscription models, and both of those are designed to kind of work within clients' budgets, but also be able to be right-sized based on their needs and give them more control and predictability over their spend, but also still gain value from the relationship. Obviously, the notion of the billable hour, as we know, and many of us have been writing and speaking about this for almost 2 decades or more,
Yeah.
I know you have, that it's inherently pitted against a client's best interests. There's a budget and control and being able to understand or have transparency sometimes around the cost. Now, we have in the enterprise sector many clients that have adopted pretty robust outside counsel guidelines by now as of 2025. So across the board, we're going to see, and we will continue to see this, increased transparency around rates, increased control that clients have around spend and spend management and budgeting. And there's a lot of tools that clients have now that maybe 10 or certainly 15 years ago they didn't have. So that places a lot more control in the hands of the client than before what they had, at least in the enterprise space. And so that has impacted a little bit. In terms of, though, your other key question around, is AI sort of the death knell for the billable hours? Is it finally going to be going away? I don't believe so. I mean, I believe to some degree we're going to see that. We're going to see, and I predict, and we're starting to see it already, large law firms tapping into what ALSPs offer, being able to offer what we offer through to their clients, leveraging us more effectively than they have in the past. So there's definitely more growth opportunity for the ALSP market, and I believe we will see that among the law firm market. I also believe that we will see law firms get a little bit more creative. I know certainly them working with us on the digital transformation front, looking at other ways that they can become more efficient with their services delivery options, looking at ways that they can offer different types of services that are more value oriented. And so we're starting to see some of that as well. And I believe that the firms that are going to innovate and look at digital transformation really strategically, like that, leverage ALSPs, leverage technology and AI where it makes sense, look at value-based pricing strategies and offerings where they can, they are going to preserve and future-proof their business models, and they're going to be able to thrive in this new economy. The ones that don't or refuse or are just holding on to the way that they've always done things, I do believe that they're going to be destabilized by what's happening technologically, but also in terms of client expectation.
Right. How soon do you see that shift really happening?
I mean, again, clients move slow as well. I mean, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of interest, and certainly legal ops teams can tend to move faster, but it's getting sort of the in-house lawyers on board. So, are we going to start to see enterprise clients start dropping all of their law firms? No. I mean, we're not going to see that overnight. Will it happen within 5 years? I think we'll definitely start to see some shifts between now and 2030 in terms of the level of reliance on outside counsel, the selections for which outside counsel are relied upon, right? So the ones that fail to innovate, fail to digitally transform, fail to sort of move forward and focus on some unique offerings or different offerings for clients will be the ones that will probably get left behind. So I do believe we will see some significant shifts and changes. And then I also believe we will see changes within the in-house market in terms of what corporate legal teams are doing, their staffing, how many people they need, what they're relying upon. We'll also see an increased reliance on not just tech, but also tech and services. So tech paired with services to me is a very powerful combination. This is why I've been involved in legal tech for so long. Paired with the services component can unlock a tremendous amount of value. And so I believe we'll start to see more combined solutions with ALSPs, with legal tech going into the market and really serving that more comprehensive need that clients have.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you see those alliances that are emerging, with ALSPs or, the big four, right, working with tech companies. And it's really interesting to watch how that model evolves. And that's another set of questions is, what does the big four mean for legal? We're talking about these perennial questions. Obviously, KPMG is taking a run at it these days, but I won't ask you to opine on that. But that tech plus services model is something that I think is really interesting. And
yes.
And it, belies what we were talking about before in terms of, investing in tech in the first place, but implementing and changing your processes and changing your culture and retrofitting it to your culture to get successful outcomes is not a one-off purchase. And it's also evolving itself, technology. If you look at AI, how much it's evolving every month. I mean, so I read some quote from a writer about AI said, this is the dumbest version of AI that you're looking at right now that you'll ever see.
Yeah.
In 5 minutes, the next minute, it's like, it's sort of the future's perennially here.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we could probably talk for hours, and I want to thank you very much, Monica, for answering all my compound questions with it today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the podcast today. So thanks again.
Thank you, Andrew. It was great to be here, and appreciate all your coverage of these amazing, interesting topics affecting our industry.
Thanks, Monica.
Thank you for tuning in to the Legal Innovation Forum podcast. Stay tuned on our website for the next edition. You can listen to us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Tune in on liforum.co/podcasts.